Hi, and welcome to the Handbag Designer 101 podcast with your host, Emily Blumenthal, handbag designer expert and handbag fairy godmother, where we cover everything about handbags from making, marketing, designing, and talking to handbag designers and industry experts about what it takes to make a successful handbag. Welcome, Aaron Luo, co-founder and CEO of CARAA. I am so excited to have you here as part of the Handbag Designer 101 podcast. In advance, I apologize for my scratchy voice. Hopefully that'll make it that much more interesting hearing me on this level. But Aaron, thank you for being here. This is so cool.
It's a pleasure. We've known each other for a long time, and I think it's going to be an exciting conversation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I think I am more than you. So let's just jump right in. So you are Chinese, but born in Spain, correct?
That's right. That's correct. Yeah, I was born in Shanghai, China, grew up there up until 4th grade, and then moved to Madrid, Spain, and that's where I grew up. I feel very much as Chinese, as Spaniard, as American, just because now I've lived in the States for 20 plus years. But yeah, came to the States for school, kind of stayed, did the bachelor, the business school, the whole shebang. And
everything that a nice, responsible, respectful Chinese child should do.
Yep.
Checked all those boxes.
Checked them all and followed the path per se. And yeah, it's been living in the US for 20 plus years. You know, I travel extensively. You know, didn't first come to fashion right away, even though my family has always been in fashion for 20 plus years.
Wait. Let's go back. Now, what is someone from China moving to Spain doing? And how many Chinese kids were there in your class?
Yeah, you know, that's a very interesting and funny question. So I moved there because my grandfather moved there. You know, matter of fact, he was one of the earlier Chinese to establish himself in Spain. And because of that, of course, you know, he ended up bringing up, you know, the entire family out in Spain. And honestly, there's just maybe
your mom's side or dad's side?
My mom's side.
So your dad went along with it?
Yeah, you know, my dad back then also traveled quite a bit. You know, you got to realize this is, you know, China in the 80s and 90s, right? Where, you know, the economical and social situations wasn't as desirable as it is now.
So you were an only child then?
I was only child.
As you do.
And then as, you know, first generation immigrant, you know, from my parents' side, you know, they're looking for the good fortune, you know, for their kids and for themselves and so on and so forth. So because of my grandfather connection, of course, you know, we ended up in Spain, and it's a lovely country. It's a lovely country. I loved it. But to answer your question, honestly, there just weren't that many Chinese, you know.
That must have been hard. Like
in the early days, for sure, you know, as an immigrant kid, you know, in a country where, you know, everybody is different. Now, given Spain is a very welcoming country, you know, nevertheless, I think there's definitely that culture shock for me, right? In the early days, I moved there when I was 9 and a half, almost 10. And my parents kind of threw me into a Catholic school, and all boys Catholic school, and zero Spanish, you know.
Different uniform. Different uniform.
Exactly. So, you know, for the first 2 years, it's a healthy combination of not really know what's going on and a healthy amount of fights, you know, as happens in boys' school.
Seriously?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, you know, little boy stuff. But no, it was a very interesting childhood, you know, raising or growing up in Spain. Like I said, it's a wonderful country. As a Spaniard, as I feel, you know, American or Chinese. And part of the reason why we ended up starting a second brand, which, you know, we can talk about that later on, it's because I feel very connected to Spain, you know, both me and my co-founder. So, but yeah, it was an interesting childhood. Loved it. And
not many people can speak to that combo. You know, like you were like a double minority.
It really was. You know, back then Spain was, you know, and I forget the percentage, but, you know, very high percentage, you know, basically Spaniard Catholics.
Right.
And yeah,
it's not like you were in South America where at least Brazil and so forth, there's gigantically high Japanese population, even more Asian. By going to Spain, which is such a uniform culture, like double culture shock, throw yourself in. And then obviously being Chinese, you had to still be the top of the top.
That's right.
Double whammo.
Yeah, it really was. You know, honestly, some of my most fond memories of my life, you know, not just my childhood, really happened in Spain. My best man, my wedding, you know, was my childhood friend from Spain. Every year I go back, I still see all my friends and we catch up and goof around. Anyways.
Your wife is not from there. She's from here.
That's right. My wife is American. Yep.
So you went there, and then what made you say that, okay, now being in Europe, that gives you an edge because you could have honestly gone to any university. Why come to America and pay full price?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know what? It sounds like you really know your stuff. You kind of know in navigating through the different educational system. But yes, growing up in Spain, easily you could go to a top university for free.
For like $1.50, if anything.
If anything. Matter of fact, I mean, I think back then they didn't have these kind of programs, but, later on, they actually even subsidize your school, right? Paying to go to school and all that. But
could you imagine that?
I know, right? I know.
What did I do wrong?
But, I love the US. In the summers, I have family in the States, right? So, when I was in my teenage years, I always spent, well, not always, but 2 summers I spent in the States. I loved it. Well, my family is in Maryland, but, I traveled quite a little bit when I was in my teenagers through YMCA program. I came here, did a consular thing. It was hilarious.
That must have been amazing. Like coming in, being like, wow, like, look at me. I didn't know I could carry so much weight as a double foreigner.
And you know what? And I feel very connected with America to a certain extent, right? Because I saw a lot of Asian Americans, because to your point earlier, right? Coming from Spain where I saw maybe 2 Chinese kids of my age.
Right.
To come to the States, it's such a diverse community.
You were like, oh my God, there were me. Who knew?
There was bubble tea and Chinese food, like it's like, which back then did not exist in Spain back in those days. And so fell in love with the country. Also really saw the opportunities that this country represents.
Yeah.
Spain, as wonderful as a country it is economically, right? It's not as, advanced as countries like the States. And I wanted more. I had that fire in me, I guess you can say, to really kind of make it for myself. And, obviously, I don't think I ever said this in public, but staying away from my parents or being away from my parents, it's exciting. Exactly, right? It's like, Lord, I can go to college and, without my parents breathing down my neck.
And just be just finally not have to follow and do what's expected, stay out late, drink, do all the crazy things that God forbid you ever did anywhere else.
That's right.
Pre-social media, of course. So they would have no account of knowing.
No idea what am I doing. There's the monthly phone call, if any, and that's kind of it. The only rule or condition, I guess, they put forward is that I had to study engineering.
Oh my God.
Which, honestly, in hindsight, I'm glad I did just because it taught me how to solve problems. I honestly did not really care about electrical engineering. I mean, don't even ask me how, certain complex circuits work, because I really didn't care too much.
I got to tell you, you're not the only Asian designer I've worked with who had a suggested, and then in parentheses, forced major of engineering. And it's like, well, it wasn't all bad because now I know how to make things. I know how to, reverse engineer, how to take things apart and see things in black and white, as opposed to like, let me just start a business. Let me just become a designer. Let me just go into something that I know absolutely nothing about and try to be a success.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. And that was the thinking, right? And I think, bless my parents' heart in terms of wanting to build or form me, right, in a certain path or a certain way. Like I said, I walked away with basically problem-solving skills. I think that's the key thing I walked away with. I knew I was going to go to business school after. I didn't want to go to business school right away, but my parents are entrepreneurs. They always have been. I grew up, in the early days washing dishes and, waitressing tables. And
what did they have? What was their business?
Well, they were serial entrepreneurs. So we started with a chain of Chinese restaurants back in the early days.
What was it called?
Well, there were a couple. The names were the typical Chinese restaurants. One is called Yin Bing, which translates to welcoming, and the second one's called Casa de Bamboo, which translates to House of Bamboo. And then we had another one called Meisan. There were a few others that they either helped to operate or invested in. But point is that I grew up, watching them. And then later on.
And then seeing that anything was possible. Like, hey, let's just start a business. And here's the template. We know what to get. We know how to build. We know how to serve. I mean,
that's right.
That is gold. I mean,
for a child, I agree.
100%.
For a child, I grew up understanding the value of hard work, because restaurants, you
oh my God,
bats, hard work, customer service,
Yeah.
Supply chain, if you really kind of translate to big words like supply chain. So, again, hated it back then when I had to wash dishes on Fridays. But taught me great values. But then later on, they switched to fashion. They had an opportunity to, basically start working on supply chain and fashion, handbags specifically, actually.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that ended up being a heritage business for the Luo family. I had no idea.
Yeah, we were fortunate enough to work with several large Italian luxury brands.
How did the switch over from food to fashion happen?
Through a series of investments, actually. Basically started with investing in a factory, then, saw an opportunity to operate the factory, started building a network. Then through our roots in Europe, a lot of, European brands start to, my dad, is a good networker and ended up being acquainted with a lot of brands.
Had they moved back to China or they stayed in Spain for all of this?
A little split, so it was a little bit of, part of the family in Spain, part of the family start operating in China. Like I said, fortunately for us, that was the time where a lot of European brands starting to venture into China to expand their manufacturing footprints. We did have actually a small factory in Florence as well, and ended up actually closing that and basically fully moving to Southeast China. Wow. And so that's kind of
what were you when all this was happening? Were you out of college? Or were you still in college?
I was in high school.
Oh, so you were still living in Spain when this whole evolution went from food to handbags, and now everybody's having to get acquainted with leathers and silhouettes and how materials and structure and just I bet your home was then all of a sudden filled with a whole bunch of samples out of nowhere.
Samples everywhere. I was that kid that instead of watching or reading, video game magazines, I was reading Vogue just because that was the only thing around. My parents basically, had all these fashion products and magazines and materials where, as a little kid, that was the first thing that you pick up when you were around the house and so on. Right. So really kind of got a sense of fashion introduction for my parents, venturing into the fashion world from that perspective, and fascinated by it. Love, the fashion side of things. I actually was a lot more interested in the retail side of the things as far as the different stores that the brands open. And of course, fascinated by the glam,
Right. How can you not?
Who wouldn't be, fascinated by that side of the fashion? Also kind of got very interested in the manufacturing side. I think most people, if you haven't really been in a manufacturing environment or setting, right? And you know this, Emily.
Yeah.
You walk into a factory and it's mesmerizing. I mean, there's some factories that you probably don't get mesmerized, but, and I've been in those. Yeah. There's a lot of them. There's wow, this is where, a Prada bag comes to life, or, this is where, a Dior bag, comes to life, right?
But let me ask you something. So where did you go to college?
University of Massachusetts in the States.
Okay.
For my undergrad.
Okay. So you're there, you've escaped your family. Thank God. Bye. I get a monthly phone call, if that, whatever. It's really interesting to me because anybody with a background like yours, I can even say like mine, the mindset is that was interesting. I'm sure I learned a lot by osmosis, but it's still the last thing I'm ever going to get involved with. I have no desire, nothing. I'm going to go into something totally different. So when you accidentally end up going back into it, it's almost like your head is kind of down when you go to your parents being like, so, hey guys, I've got an idea. Hey guys, or was it your parents like, listen, when you're ready, you're coming back. How did all that manifest? So you graduated and then what?
Yeah, it's the former. It's very interesting, right? So I was very fascinated by the whole fashion thing, but I knew that I didn't want to just do manufacturing and supply chain, to a certain extent. Especially back in the...
Interesting, but not sexy.
And not just that, I feel like, in the early 2000s, right? I feel, especially once I started getting educated with American education and started learning about supply chain operations and so on and so forth. To a certain extent, I feel that was a little bit of a commodity to a certain extent, right?
Totally.
In the sense that, you with the right connections, which a lot of people have connections, with the right connections and with a little bit of, perhaps rigor or discipline, you could get into a really great factory. You don't need to operate it, right? To some extent.
Correct.
What really fascinated me was the branding side. Branding, retail. So that was very fascinating to me. I don't think I'm that smart of a business person, but I was smart enough to know that I did not have what it takes to run a brand or nor a company. So I knew I was foolish if I was going to go back to my dad and say like, hey, look, I'm graduated from college. I did what you said. And I'm a big man now coming out. Let me get an executive position in your company, right? I mean, first of all, he probably would slap me and say, no, you're going to start in the warehouse.
Right.
But second of all, I just knew I didn't have it, right? So right after college, I actually wanted to go and work for an American company. There's just several in my mind that I really wanted to work for, really to learn process, operations, finance. There's certain functions and skill sets that I think any business person, whether you're in fashion, whether you're in tech, or whether you're in any other industry, that if you don't have it, I think, you are handicapped.
Well, and you just called out a very important point of this recognition to get paid to learn. And a lot of people, I think, don't see the value in that or just want to try and skip steps. But by skipping steps, you not only lose time, lose money, and the sunk costs of that learning curve are extreme. So, 100%. Check to you, Aaron, for figuring that out very early, saying, let me figure this out. Let me learn something else. Let me have someone pay me for it and then see what I need to do.
Yeah, and that was the idea, that I wanted to trip. I wanted to fail to a certain extent, right? I wanted to get beat up.
On somebody else's time.
Well, and somebody who is not going to be cuddling me, right? Because, the reality is that if you join a family business and your family, right, your uncles and your dad are the head of the family, you're going to get cuddled. You're going to get cuddled. Well, I think in Chinese culture, yes. Even though I think... again,
abusive on the inside, but coddled on the outside.
Yeah, and the worker, right? You're going to start from the bottom. Even your managers will treat you differently. I know this because I've seen it, right? My cousins and so forth. So I wanted to get beat up a little bit on my own by Western culture to a certain extent, and I got my fair share.
You hadn't been enough already.
No, because you go through college. College is, and I joke around. College is somewhat of a vacation to a certain extent. No, in the best of ways, right? Because you are in such a kind of controlled environment. You're there to learn. Yes, you have off-campus jobs, but come on, let's face it, those are.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's
100%. Yes.
So I loved college. I was like, this is heaven.
Oh my God, if I could go back, magic. I know. I feel the same way. Like walking around with a backpack, being stressed about a test. Come on, give it to me.
I know.
Give it to me.
I know. So yeah, I really wanted to, like I said, the key thing is I knew I didn't know finance. I didn't know operations. I didn't know processes. I didn't know the rigor of quarterly closing or short-term outlooks. There's so many things I learned from General Electric. So, General Electric, GE was one of the key brands of businesses that I really, really wanted to join. Back then, I read a book from Jack Welch.
Yeah.
I don't,
he was like this on the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
He actually went to my school, and his fraternity actually was next to my fraternity. And anyways, I got exposed to GE very early on in my days in college and loved the concept of a conglomerate, got fascinated by the company in general. And I say, look, there's few, right? There's McKinsey, there's GE, there's few others out there. And I said, if I was going to pick a company to work for, these are the guys, right, that I need to kind of cut my teeth in. And fortunately enough, I was, offered a great role with GE actually back in my junior day. So they locked me in my junior year.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
The magic summer tap, like we want you back. That was very lucky. That was very lucky. I like to say that I did work hard. That's true, but it was dream come true. So, spent 10 years with GE, primarily in operations and finance, dabbled into merchant acquisitions a little bit too, towards the end. Before I left, I was a CFO for one of their operations, which was very exciting. Pretty young for you to be doing that at that age, weren't you?
And that's the reason why I wanted to join GE, right? There are several companies that I knew that if you're good and you're willing to work your butt off, like truly your butt off, and you're willing to make certain sacrifices, they tap you. They give you the opportunity. And which is something to be said about, GE. Now for GE, it's in a different spot now, and all that. But so that was truthfully one of the things that really kind of inspired me to join the company, because I knew that if I did good and work hard and accelerated that I could go far at a young age. Because I didn't have a lot of patience. I didn't want to spend, lifetime learning and then...
Yeah, and then wait. Yeah. So at this point, now you have a colleague named Carmen Chen Wu. So I know you have some history with her, and a lot of people assume that she's your wife/partner. She is none of the above.
None of it.
And none of the above. And talk a little bit about how that came to be, because I know you knew her from your childhood, and how did all that, hey, let's just start a handbag brand. Let's name it after you. And by the way, my wife is going to know that I'm with you all the time. And it's a very interesting dynamic. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the juicy stuff, right?
Because a lot of people don't know that. I know because I'm privy to that, because you were through the Handbag Awards. We had a micro licensing deal that never went anywhere. Thank God. I'm so happy it didn't, because, you pivoted right after. Not taking credit for it, but maybe I will a tiny bit. But for you to speak about how Carmen Chen Wu came to be, and then what prompted CARAA to magically appear right after.
Yeah, no, it's been a wonderful journey. So right after, the whole thing I mentioned about GE and business school and all that, back in 2012, 2013, I was ready to take that jump, right? A lot of things just fall into place. And I said, this is it.
How old were you?
I was in my early 30s.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's honestly also part of the reason why I say it's even either now or I wouldn't say never, because I see a lot of successful entrepreneurs that start in the 40s, even 50s.
But for you, it was now or now. That's it.
For me, it felt right. It felt that the timing was right. There was a lot of things in the family side of things that also were ready.
And you had obviously saved a nice chunk of money to give you this buffer to start a business, because you can't do it for.
Not enough. But
yes,
not enough. But yes, it was planned to a certain extent. I like to say it was planned for the long time. Reality probably was planned more like 6 months. And I knew I want to be in fashion. I knew I want to be in a handbag because of the leg up that my family has in the supply chain of the things, right? Yeah. But I, again, was smart enough to know that I'm not a designer. Right. I don't even know how to draw, to be honest with you. I think I'm a good merchandiser at this point. I think
that's just as important, if not more, I think.
I would agree. But, I said to really create a contemporary handbag brand. And I've seen it from other brands that my parents either helped or invested in. So, I've seen a lot of kind of evolution of other brands on the sidelines. And I'm like, this thing's never going to go anywhere without just a rock star designer, right? And interesting enough, so Carmen is also from Spain. So Carmen Chen Wu is my co-founder and the spirit animal of our brand, the muse and the spirit animal. And she's the core of CARAA. Now I can say this.
How did you find her, reconnect with her, collect her? And meet again? I know that how many Chinese were there in Spain at that time?
No many.
Each other at the meetings.
No many. So our families knew each other from the Spanish days, right? So my grandfather, like I mentioned before, he was one of the early Chinese to establish himself in Spain. And he was a lawyer. He was a lawyer by trade. And he also happened to love the Spanish culture and the Spanish language. And because of that, he picked up Spanish very early on. And in translation, he essentially used his skills to help a lot of entrepreneurs in Spain to start Chinese restaurants or other businesses. As you can imagine, if you move from China to Spain, even if you had funds to invest in, unless you know the local language or so on and so forth. You need a lawyer basically on your side to start, businesses. And
you also need to know how much of the Chinese food needs to be Chinese to sell. So,
right.
Having been in Spain and studied in Sevilla and Asturias, I've been all over. Like any Chinese restaurant you go in, especially as an American, you're like, please let them have something that I can identify with. So understanding the sellability of a customer is just as important.
That's right, because a lot of dishes are actually quote unquote translated to Spanish palates, right?
Yeah,
they're not truly authentic. Now things has changed, but back then, a spring roll is not the spring rolls that probably we're used to in the States or in China, right? Which like a very thin crust, a lot of juicy veggies inside with few pieces of meat. In Spain, it's totally different. It's very thick crust, not very juicy. Anyways, it's translated.
I would love to. I mean, your next bag should be like called the Spanish spring roll, because I think there's so much in that right there. That's like a whole story in itself. Okay, so your grandfather knew Carmen's grandmother?
Grandmother. And honestly, I was just doing a little research in the States and just stumbled upon Carmen. She's, of course, a CFDA awarded fashion designer. Top of the class in Parsons, won numerous awards beforehand, and happens to be Chinese from Valencia, which is so
not so common.
Not common at all. And
so were you just digging for designers and looking for someone who is Chinese? Like, how did you
It was a combination of things. It was a little bit of that. It was a little bit of, talking to my parents as far as, what venues and what different areas I can, kind of tap into. And they brought up, hey, I think, so-and-so's granddaughter, actually, it's in the States. It's just wild, right?
Wow.
It's really fate. It's really a unicorn story in the sense that
there's a saying in Yiddish or German, however you want to call it, called beschert. And it means it is written. Like this was predetermined, predestined to happen.
Yeah, no, it really was. It was magic. And because, how many times can you say that everything just fell into place all at once, right? Is that I'm ready to start a brand, handbag specifically, contemporary, back then Carmen was ready to do a very similar kind of a jump, right, in terms of a career. And
when you reached out to her, was she like, who are you? Or my grandma told me you were calling.
No, she didn't know. She didn't know. But the introduction was that, hey, I think our grandparents know each other. Matter of fact, they did business together, right?
Did you write her in Spanish or English?
In English. It was in English. And we started just gelling right away. It's like our backgrounds are so similar. We both have the same interests, in terms of wanting to start a fashion brand. I love her design aesthetic. I mean, and I'm not saying this just because she's my, business partner and co-founder of the brand. I think she's one of the most talented handbag designers that I've known, and I've seen my fair share of them.
100%.
When I see her drawing and thinking through concepts with her team and merchandising conversations and all that, honestly, it's magic to see things coming out of thin air, when she's at work.
Was that weird for your wife?
No, I think
it's a little strange. Yeah. Like, hey, I found this girl. Yeah. I'm going to spend all my time with her. We're going to start a business. And don't worry, I'm going to tell everybody we're not together. So, yeah. I mean, honestly, because that's just the assumption.
Yeah, and we got a lot of that, right? It's that, to your point, everybody assumes that we're together, we're married, and all that. I think, obviously, transparency, it's very critical in any relationship, right? So being upfront with that, I think it's important. I think, again, my wife, and I'm sure she'll be okay with me saying this, my wife is a very confident woman. Okay.
She's just fine.
She's very confident in our marriage, in our relationship, and in herself, of course. And so, I say this is somewhat of a fairy tale because Carmen and I have been working on this brand and, other ventures and so on and so forth and other brands for the last 10 years together. We hardly ever fight. And that's a question I get a lot in interviews from the press is that, like, how is it like to have a co-founder, right? And it's hard, Emily. And you've seen your fair share of startup brands. Co-founders fight and they split up. Matter of fact, I read this somewhere not that long ago that I think over 50% of brands, especially in retail and fashion, that ends up dissolving or going away or being sold, whatever it is, it's not because the brand couldn't sustain or it's because of differences between the co-founders. I mean,
it's a divorce like anything else. It's hard. You start out kind of in this bubble. And then when interest, attention, growth, ego, scale, there's always, because you both can't be doing the exact same thing. Like one person has to be designated to one and then designated to another. And differences of opinions come, and then you have to come up very quickly with a way that you can determine what is more important to one person versus what is more like, is this a 10 for you or a 2 for you? Because if it's a 2 for me and it's 10 for you, we'll just go with that. That's it, the end.
Yep, 100%. Very, very hard. And the fact that we worked with each other for 10 years and build an amazing brand and building on the second one as we speak, it's a miracle, honestly. And we reflect on our journey, right? From time to time. We're so busy that we don't get a chance to really reflect too often, but a lot of it's based out of, well, to your point earlier, right? The skill sets has to complement each other, never, conflict or contract with each other, because then you're going to end up in a situation where both of you want to make a call and who's going to make that call at the end of the day, right? And that's where the friction happens.
How did you go from Carmen Chen Wu and being like, hey, girl, we're going to call it after you because you're the talent, to, hey, I think it's time to pivot and let's call it something else?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things in the early days. I think Carmen, when we started CARAA, or we started working together before we even landed on the name of CARAA, there was Carmen Chen Wu, her namesake brand.
I know you did CCW or Carmen, CCW came after, right?
That's right. And I think at one point we both came to conclusion, more Carmen than me, because I actually was totally okay with just continue calling, Carmen Chen Wu or CCW.
It's a cool name.
It's a great name. It's a great name. And even the short of it, it's wonderful. I think, she did not want to create a brand, a namesake brand. I think that's her vision, right? Is that, the brand should sustain itself without the designer. And again, there's plenty of brands out there that, even after the brand was sold, right, and the designer is no longer involved or involved more as a figure, they continue to be very successful. That's great. And I'm not saying that cannot be the case, but for her, she won the brand that is not necessarily always tied to her persona to a certain extent, even though she is the spirit animal behind the brand and, the nucleus of the brand for the last decade. She won the brand that basically can last forever, even though we both are not here, right? So
right.
CARAA, I don't know if you know this, it's a combination of her name and my name together.
I did. Of course I did.
Of course I did.
Aaron.
So you probably know this, but for those who don't know, one of the things that we really pride ourselves, in CARAA specifically, was that besides being, just a beautiful product, right, in terms of design and the materials that we use, it's extremely functional. It's a very functional handbag.
Very different aesthetic product and so forth from Carmen Chen Wu CCW. That was very fashion driven, not that these aren't, but this was very, the lane was very crowded where you were to CARAA. And if I'm not mistaken, you yourself were also on a reality show for a minute trying to pitch and get money. Like Honey Bunny, I know all those stories. Everything in the closet. And they weren't very kind to you also, which really pissed me off.
Yeah.
Like, I know his vision, and I know the people who were on the other side, like, well, do you get it? I'm like, he gets it. Watch the space.
Yeah. No.
So being an early adopter into athleisure for a handbag, you're up against a lot. It's like being a pioneer is good, but it's also, you want to be the first, the fastest, and the best. But then the flip side of that is like, you're the one paving the way, which is almost just as problematic.
It was hard. We got slapped left and right in the early days, So yes, we were in Project Runway, or spin-off, I think, of the project.
Yeah, right? It was Project Entrepreneur or something like that.
Yeah, you're right. I think it was Project Entrepreneur. Great memory, Emily.
Don't go there. It's all there, Aaron. It's all there.
How do you do it? So yeah, it was fun. We, of course, I can go on forever about funding, by the way. Okay. In terms, I think funding, it's a very slippery slope when it comes to fashion brands. And, we were involved in a number of, accelerators, and pre-venture funding organizations in the early days. And I got a very inside look into venture funding. Of course, with my finance background, I was fortunate enough, because I was with GE, I was fortunate enough to see so many different pitches and deals coming through my desk. I got to tell you, I don't say I'm 100% disagreeing, but I think venture funding and fashion brands doesn't really work. In the early days.
For what you were going to say.
No, it's they don't.
It's the wrong industry. It's like doing it for food. It's the fashion is too quick. The trends move too fast. The customer is too fickle. You get stuck with inventory. That's a plus on the balance sheet, but it's truly a minus. Your fashion is you're driving the car off the lot and hoping for the best, that it doesn't lose value as soon as it leaves the store.
Yeah.
You can't. And it's funny that you going in with a finance background assume that that's the road, but it's not. And I think that's a learning curve on your part. You had no choice but to get it backwards.
And you got to realize we started the brand in 2013, 2014, right? And part of the reason why we wanted to start CARAA specifically was that we saw great DTC brands that came before us. You call it digital native back then, or digital first, later on DTC. I think the terms keep changing. But we saw some great brands coming before us, Bonobos and Everlane and Dollar
Kuyana and all those. Yep.
Exactly. And what's interesting, Kuyana might be a slightly different story. Kind of the same, but ish. But, Outdoor Voices, right? All those brands, like when we start looking into kind of the founding story.
Well, don't go to Other Voices now. So, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. That's exactly the point, right? Is that a lot of them, they were great marketers. There was so much to learn when it comes to branding and marketing, right? I mean, think about Bonobos. When Andy Dunn started the brand with Brian, the concept was different. It really was in the sense that, right? It's that, you buy a product, it's directly coming to you. Not that DTC didn't exist before. Of course, the concept was always there, but he really leveraged tech, right? And then cheap advertising through Instagram and Facebook to really get the story out. And it was a great business model. But one thing we realized was that, hey, when it comes to the product, it's like, it's not bad. I'm not trashing any brands, but it was like,
Right.
And we're just like, okay. And by the way, I wanted to love Bonobos, and just picking Andy for a minute, right?
Well, as a men's brand, like that was a space that no one had touched. I get that. And their marketing was genius.
Great marketing.
Yes. I mean, I've been professoring long before they started. And when I saw it coming up, it's like, wow, look at this white space that they hit, that they really can't get pushback because no one's doing it. Much like, CARAA in that regard. But you're so spot on that the product doesn't fit the narrative. It's like the narrative can only get you to a certain point because you need the product to make it all the way around the bases.
And you talk about LTV, right? So, lifetime value of the customer. If your product it's but your marketing is really good, you will get probably a cheap acquisition to acquire the customer, right? Your first time acquiring the customer might be cheap because of the story you tell. But when you think about the lifetime and the repeatability of that customer, that comes not from branding, that comes from product.
Right?
Exactly.
That's your 80-20.
That's right. And it's interesting because their whole pitch back then was that, hey, I can lose a little bit of money with, first time acquisition of the customer because I'm betting on the fact they're going to come back later on. So my LTV, ultimately, it's very high, even though my acquisition cost is very high in the early days, right? And again, if your product it's not superior, honestly, that equation is going to fail. And I saw that. I saw that. And by the way, not to say that I'm not the foresight of seeing the future, but the reality is that a lot of this brand ends up actually failing, right? Yeah. And I can say that because some of them did end up failing because that thesis is wrong. That thesis is totally wrong. You cannot lose, even Casper, that they were saying that, okay, we don't have LTV, so I'm okay with acquiring a little bit more, paying a little bit more on acquisition first because my margins are so high. It ends up, not working out. And of course, that's a different story for another day. But anyways, to answer your question in terms of how we thought about this, we said, look, we have a super talented design team, right? Or back then it was just one designer, but, now we have a team. But Carmen is a rock star. So what if we learn everything we know about DTC, the foremothers and forefathers that came before us, right? In terms of narrative, storytelling, branding, and so on and so forth, but flip the equation a little bit and really let the product actually shine. And we were fortunate enough to actually, kind of really identify a spot that nobody were really doing it, right?
How did you, the pair of you being like, athleisure, let's do a bag for that? Because how did that happen? Especially after doing a fashion brand that did okay. It didn't, it's not CARAA level, but how were you like, I think this is our lane to go in?
Yeah. And that was an interesting kind of how we landed in the concept. So we actually didn't even want to be associated in the early days with athleisure. It was a little bit of a fad back then. Right. Everybody was like, is this here to stay? Is this, and then I got an interview in the early days, like, well, what do you think about athleisure? And I'm like, I have no idea.
Much.
I'm like, I have no idea. But one thing I can tell you is that healthy living, it's here to stay. Right. So when we started looking at data, both Carmen and I are super data oriented, we start realizing, that people's lifestyle is starting to change.
Right.
And people are working out a lot more, being a lot more health conscious. And, for being in a metro area like New York, people are constantly on the go, right? And we see so many customers or just consumers in general with 2 or 3 bags on the street. I mean, you've seen, right?
Oh, yeah.
One for the gym, one for the office, one for going out. And we're like,
I love when people say it's a day to night bag, because you and I both know that does not exist.
No, it doesn't. No. It doesn't. No. So we said, what if we give her a bag? And back then, one of our early partnerships that we had was with Equinox, right? So we kind of leverage them or use their customers almost like model customer to a certain extent. Like,
right.
If we were going to service an Equinox customer, right? What kind of bag would she need? What she's going to wear? Again, Fast Company and few other editorials called us the brand that invented the athleisure handbag. I didn't coin that term, but I take it,
Own it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Listen, people call me a fairy godmother. And you could be called much worse.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's right.
That's how I see it.
So we're like, what? Let's just run with it. But that was the genesis of the brand, is that we felt that, look, to your point earlier too, there's so many great handbag brands out there. So many, right? From luxury all the way down to contemporary. And we just felt that if you value proposition to convince a customer to buy your product, it's because I can do it better or mine is prettier. That's a very hard proposition to convince other people. It takes a lot of dollars to see it on the celebrities. It just takes a long journey.
My God, forget it. And the interesting thing, this aspiration of influencer or creator, whatever you want to call it, gifting it to people, that comes at such a cost, because the ROI for that 9 times out of 10 is so low, and people don't even realize that. Like
100%.
Back 100%. In the day, you gift it to a stylist, hope that the celebrity wears it, then hope it shows up in Us Weekly or People Style Watch, RIP, almost all of them in print. And now it's like you need the validation of your customer of being a brand with fans and really catering to their personal needs and identifying that through your site and building that community. Because without that community, you have no brand.
100%. You have to have that first party data in order for you to actually be a sustainable brand. Without that, you are at the mercy of others to, you are at the will in terms of how do you tell the story. So yes, that was kind of the genesis, behind the brand in the early days, where we said, look, I think, there is a space where we know that we want to be contemporary, we want to be aspirational, but we want to make our product a lot more functional. And for us, functionality means first and foremost material science. So we invest a lot of R&D into developing and using different nylons. Nylon is probably one of the key fabrics that we use.
Is the production done still through your family's factories?
Not anymore. It used to be, but a lot of great connections that we have.
Was that hard to move away?
No,
no. Internally being like, hey guys, we can't do this anymore because this does not fit our model.
No. It wasn't necessarily fitting our model. It was just because the price point honestly didn't, because
you were more expensive than what they were doing.
We just got bigger. We got bigger, and the volume just got to a certain point that we can get a lot more economy of scale with larger factories.
Right.
My family factory is still, I would say, probably mid-size. Again, large factory, there's bad ones and there's great ones.
100%.
Right? The really great ones are the ones that, respects and values design and quality, but still gives you the economy of scale. So that's kind of what we're looking for on the supply chain side and the production side of things. But yeah, so back to what I was saying, functionality from very early on, and we're still very much lean on those pillars, is material science. You have to make sure that you use an exquisite product that's durable, that's light, that feels, silky and buttery on the touch. All that comes with R&D investment.
100%.
We also invest heavily in different ways that you can carry the product, right? When it comes to design, multi-strap system is one of the key design features that we, always rely on. When it comes to pockets, a lot of people is like, the more the merrier. We disagree. When it comes to pockets, we feel like, pockets needs to be designed thoughtfully and has to have a purpose, right?
100%.
Sticking in a few pockets just because everybody else is doing it, or because we feel like just give, some compartment for the user. That's not right. And so we spend a lot of time researching, working with, our ambassadors. We have a pretty decent sized ambassador program at this point. Not only they help us tell the story, in terms of the brand and of course carry our products, but also their feedback is very valuable to the designer.
To identify what's missing, to identify what we need. Oh, this didn't work. I would like this. Can you do that?
Yep. And again, we don't always listen to our customers, right?
Because that's to the extent, like, I want it in yellow. Guess what? Yellow doesn't sell, or whatever, something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Carmen likes to say always that, the great designers at the end of the day are the ones who will tell you something that you need before you know you may need it. Right.
Bingo. Yep.
So asking your consumers to always help you design, it's one data point,
Whenever I see people doing this, help design our bag, and I'm like, oh, honey bunny, that's the wrong way to go. Yeah. Or whenever I see a new brand saying it's bespoke, it's like, you bought too many materials. You don't know how to do this. You don't know how to scale. It's like red flags to me that I think a lot of customers are a lot more savvy than what you think they are when you're trying to sell them something.
Oh, 100%. I mean, just to quickly touch on that point, look, customers are more savvy than ever, especially with Gen Z, and much more than before. And, of course, with all the return policies that, most brands have, if you are BSing your customers through marketing, worst case scenario, they will actually not even return the product and don't ever buy it from you again. Best case scenario is they come back, tell you why they didn't like the product, and perhaps exchange for something, right? So point is that I think to your point, you can't fool a customer these days, not anymore in terms of, and I don't think you ever could in the past, but.
Oh, but now with the way that people can communicate, no way, forget it. You Google 100%. One bad review, that's there for life. Like,
no, 100%.
It's not going anywhere.
100%.
Aaron, I would love to know where CARAA is going, Mercado famous, wrap all this into one big bow. What's to come? Where are we now?
Yeah. So Carmen and I have been working with each other for a decade, but, CARAA, it's been around probably for 8 years, 7 or 8 years. I think for us, we're ready to scale. It's very funny because a lot of people want to scale early. And that's, back to my point about VCs before, because as soon as you start taking external funding, you're obligated to your investors. You have fiduciary duty to your investors to actually grow for them and for yourself, but for them also because they're on the same boat as you. And that's prone to make mistakes, to your point. Right?
Yeah.
So we took really cautious baby steps in our early journey. I think, the brand is at a point where our supply chain is robust. Our team, we finally are at the point where we feel like we have a right-sized team to help us scale. So I think you can expect us to grow significantly, I think, in the next 3 to 4 years. I don't know if we're ever going to expand beyond accessories. I think when I say we, Carmen and myself, but Carmen believes in the value of being specialist in something, right?
Be the best at something.
Exactly. So when people think about, functional travel bag or functional baby bag or, functional pet bag or sports bag.
Still a bag.
Exactly.
Still a bag.
Go to the bag brand that specializes versus go to a quote unquote lifestyle brand, right? Which is like, has a lot of everything, but it's like,
still a bag.
100%.
Stick to what you're good at.
So that's that. I think, we started a second brand called Mercado Famous. We bring Spanish charcuterie to the States. Very different brand. Honestly, started as, a passion project because our love to Spain and because we just got frustrated not be able to find good charcuterie in the States from Spain. So, and we, if you haven't seen the website, we have a great swag, so part of kind of the, we joke around and say that part of the intangible benefits that comes with Mercado Famous is that we actually can bring really great hoodies from some of the luxury factories that we know. So
there's your opportunity to lifestyle.
Maybe, use that as a platform.
Listen, if I'm going to get jamon or a chorizo, I want to see it on a hoodie. The end. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. So we're going to continue growing that brand. I think it's getting a lot of love. I think we pay a lot of attention to branding and design. The product comes from an organic farm with 100-year-old recipe that treats the pig the right way. We never use the word kill. We always use the word sacrifice because we're sacrificing the animal for the consumption of humans. So very excited about the brand. You will see us growing there. And, we're starting to help others, help other brands to maneuver through maybe some challenges they have. I don't want to say that we are, starting to give back because we're not there yet, but I think, we make small investments where we see those things happen and we see a fit. So we'll be doing some of that as well along the way. But we primarily is blow out CARAA, in terms of, I feel like we're at the point where, at the tipping point where you've been growing. I remember I was not that long ago in a conference in Miami. I was in the room full of, ladies and, CARAA, it's a woman's brand, one service man. And I was telling the story of CARAA. Everybody's kind of listening to me. And at the end of my spiel, I guess, they're like, why haven't I heard about this brand before? Like, you just speaking my ear, like I need this.
Right.
And that's the trade-off, right? That's a trade-off of not over advertising or marketing your product, because we didn't want to spend all the dollars, right, in that function.
That is a trade-off.
That's right.
100%.
That's right. So, now that we are at the point where we feel like financially we can tell the bigger story or to a wider audience, you're going to see a lot of us, hopefully.
Man, I am here for it. Aaron, how do we follow you? Learn more.
Yeah. So you can find CARAA at CARAA.co. So it's CARAA.co. You can also follow us on Instagram. Instagram, it's primarily the platform we use together with TikTok. I think we're getting better at TikTok, but when it comes to social media, I think Instagram is the best place to find us. You can find us at CARAA Sport. That's the handle. And then for those of you who are aficionados and lovers of meats and Spanish meats specifically, you can find Mercado at mercadofamous.com. And then same way on Instagram, the handle is mercadofamous.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. I am here for the meats. I'm here for the bags. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us with Handbag Designer 101. Man, we are following, eating, wearing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fun conversation. And thanks again.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and review and follow us on every single platform at Handbag Designer. Thanks so much. See you next time.